Johnny and Justin were two simple Imagineers at Disneyland until they dared to ask the question,
Hey, Justin, is Disney diverse?
Well, Johnny, I'm not.
Oh no, we've angered the mouse!
Stormtroopers, run!
Holy crap, it's a gathering of cookies!
Now, from undisclosed locations within the Disney park, Johnny and Justin record a podcast where they seek to answer the question, is the Disney catalog diverse?
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Disney+Diversity. I'm Johnny.
I'm Justin.
And today we're being joined by a very special guest, the Toni Sanchez!
The one.
The Toni Sanchez. The Toni
Hello.
Sanchez.
Yes, below them kisses.
For many fans.
Hi.
And as you know, here on Disney+Diversity, we usually review the Disney catalog to see how diverse and inclusive it actually is. But today, we have a very special episode. Let's talk about drugs.
I'm so excited.
No, I'm joking.
Oh, wow.
Okay, we're not ABC
We'll do
family.
that another month.
Yeah, exactly. But here's the thing, we do have a very special episode because, as you know, it's Pride Month, and we asked Toni to come on because Toni is a member of the LGBTQI community, and she's also very informed about many diverse issues. And then, but this, Toni kind of enlightened us to the point that Disney kind of has a very somewhat complicated relationship with Disney and representing LGBTQI characters and whatnot. And so we asked Toni to come on today and inform us of this. And in a way, welcome to Toni's TED Talk.
Oh, wow. We're calling it that. Okay. Rainbows. So I don't know if you guys, I'm sure that somebody has kind of like crawled upon this at some point or another, but usually,
on the interwebs.
especially, it's something that always pops up on the interwebs somehow, some way, but this kind of got inspired by that whole idea that all Disney villains are gay, right?
Mhm.
Like there's an entire discourse about how the Disney villains, they are in some way queer coded, right? And queer coding, of course, being like when you are actually portraying characters with characteristics of a queer person, but usually you're not stating outright that those are queer characters, right?
Yeah. Interesting.
And for a bigger breakdown, you can actually go check out, I do a podcast called Have You Tried Not Being a Podcast? It's about queer representation in pop culture and media. We do an entire episode about queer coding and queer baiting. So I think like if anybody wants a more in-depth, detailed explanation of what queer coding is and can be, then yeah, definitely head over there.
And link in the bio below.
Sure. Yeah, down there. So what we're talking about though, and what people are saying when they mean like, oh, all Disney villains are gay, what is that about? You kind of have to go back, like all the way back to the 1930s, actually, to a little thing called the Hays Code. So the Motion Picture Production Code, and it was called the Hays Code because it was named after the motion picture, or what was the precursor to the Motion Picture Association of America. Their president at the time, his last name was Hays, so it just kind of became colloquially known as the Hays Code. So the Hays Code was just a long list of do's and don'ts for major film studios in America. And, you know, it's a little lengthy, and it went through several iterations. Like there was proposals. I think like the first iteration of it was all the way back in 1927.
Wow.
So you're talking about 40 years in which this code was not only around, but definitely at 1934 is when it really became strictly enforced, where you had to submit your film to make sure that it met all standards of that code. And if it didn't, you either had to cut it or go back and redo something. So yeah, it was very, very strict at a certain point. But we obviously don't have the time to go through every single thing.
No.
But
Toni, Hays Code.
Yeah, I do want to go through the first three general principles of the Hays Code, which is, so number one, no picture shall be produced which will lower the moral standards of those who see it. Hence, the sympathy of the audience shall never be thrown to the side of crime, wrongdoing, evil, or sin. Number two, correct standards of life, subject only to the requirements of drama and entertainment, shall be presented. Number three, law, natural or human, shall not be ridiculed, nor shall sympathy be created for its violation.
Mm.
So as you can imagine, this actually all the rules kind of stem from these three principles, right?
Yeah.
They were
And-
very yeah, go ahead,
Tony, so,
Johnny.
so quick question. So this is the precursor to like what they use today as the motion picture ratings, pretty much, right?
A little bit, yeah. Instead of, we didn't have ratings back then, so what we did have is just like absolutely nothing that's going to be in a film will not have any of X, Y, and Z.
Any of these things, gotcha, for sure.
Any
For
of these
sure.
things. And it
So
was
instead of
things
having ratings,
like
it's just like boom, just we don't care if you
there'll
break one of
be,
these rules, we're just not gonna put
exactly,
it out.
we're
There
not,
it
or
is.
you'll be fined, or you'll be, you know, any number of things that could have been handed down. But more often than not, you wouldn't get your film out there. So it just, at a certain point,
Where were these
you
rules
couldn't.
there for Birth of a Nation? Where were these rules there for Birth of a Nation? But that's neither
So
here nor
like
there. That's neither here nor there. Continue,
Birth
Tony.
of a
I'm sorry.
Nation is precedes. Birth of a Nation precedes the Hays Code. So actually,
Son of a gun.
you
Son of
had
a
a
bitch.
lot of films
Son of a bitch.
prior to the Hays Code that actually got in a lot of really ridiculous stuff, including like the Hays Code actually explicitly forbids the use of racial slurs and things like that. So there are some good things in the Hays Code, but by and large, it's mostly things about like, you know, promoting, you know, cis heteronormative, you know, relationships, traditional gender roles.
Right.
Where we get into with Disney, right, and where that this all kind of stems into. When you talk about not creating sympathy for people who are kind of, you know, either flouting man or natural law, right? You're talking about you can't portray villains as sympathetic at all. All villainous crime and wrongdoing, anything like that has to be portrayed in a negative light, right?
Right.
So any person that isn't a good person is not a good guy within the context of the film. You have to go ahead and ascribe them certain characteristics, right? So I think you kind of see where I'm going with this, right?
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
So then you get a lot of, especially like in the 1930s and 40s, you get characters like the shady, effeminate villains, right? The male villains that are kind of like too slick, a little too fashion forward, just a little like, okay, could be, maybe not, I don't know. But it doesn't matter because at the end, they're going to die because they're a villain and they have to die or they have to be punished.
Kind of like Captain Hook.
Exactly.
Blast that Peter Pan. If I could only find his hideout, I'd trap him in his lair. But where is it?
Oh,
Exactly.
damn.
Exactly. Or you get women, femme fatale characters who are not even the fact that they're queer, just the fact that they're sexually empowered and they're actually using their sexuality in a way that is not good. So therefore they have to be bad. Right. And then you kind of see how that leads up into the influencing of characters like Maleficent, the witch from Snow White. You know, these are very like, you know, seductive, you know, very sensual characters. And they aren't bad because of their sensuality. It's just that they've gone ahead and ascribed a certain characteristic in order to punish it because that's not what good women do, right? That's not what good people do.
Yeah, so in a way, it's like it's causing like women's sexuality to be seen as a negative. So things that make women feminine or like empowers them to like sexuality, they seen as a negative. Damn, that's terrible.
No, not even women's sexuality, but all sexuality. I like a big trope. Like you guys remember Princess Diaries, where Princess Mia is talking about like getting the foot pop when she kisses, you know, a boy that she likes for the first time.
Right.
That comes from classic cinema because way back when you couldn't portray sex, you couldn't portray passion on the screen. So what they did is they developed a sort of visual shorthand. So whenever you would see somebody, you know, like, oh, we're going to just a normal, like just a kiss, but the foot would come up. It was meant to kind of imply like, oh, there's tingles and jingles happening.
Right.
They're going to happen.
It's like her leg is going up, and so is something else.
Right. Well, well, the whole 1 foot thing was also because women and people, not just women, but everybody, all feet had to be on the ground. Like you could not you couldn't have somebody on a bed, right? Because then their feet would leave the ground. So 1 foot always had to be on the ground. So that's where you got the foot pump, right? So all sexuality was just taboo, right? So all portrayals of any kind of just chaste, monogamous, hetero, you know, sexuality and affection was just nowhere to be seen. And if it was meant to say like, this is bad and it's going to be punished by the end of this film. So when we get to Disney kind of creating its first like classic films and characters, they're not reinventing the wheel, right?
Right.
They're just adapting fairy tales and folk tales. But then what they're also doing is borrowing tropes from classic cinema. But those tropes from classic cinema have been influenced by that Hays Code, which says that a very particular person is a good person and a very particular person is a bad person. So then you start taking these queer coded traits and imbuing your villains with it, because who cares? By the end of the time, more often than not, they're either dead, they've been killed by the prince, they've been banished from the kingdom, or what have you. And everybody who is a good person, well, all they want is just true love with their one and only, and their one and only is a man, and that's all so, good guys are this, bad guys are that. So what ended up happening, though, is especially when you get to a certain point, people start realizing, like, oh, it's not that gay people and people with queer characteristics are bad. It's just the fact that you guys took something that was influenced by this very narrow description of what was good versus bad, and you took the characteristics of a very specific community and you imbued your villains with it. So now what's happening, subconsciously, is that you're ascribing, the bad label and the evil label and the wrong label to queer characteristics and queer characters.
Well,
And
yeah,
that's something that we're now trying to deconstruct, and we're now trying to imbue our characters. And now that's why you have this like explosion of like anti-heroes, of sympathetic villains.
Something changed that day inside Lotso. Something snapped.
She replaced us. Come on.
No, she only replaced you.
She replaced all of us, didn't she?
Right.
People that were like, okay, I can, I mean, that's what makes, when we talk about media, like, yeah, I don't agree with what the villain has done, but I get it. Like, I get it. That would have been absolutely impossible during the time of that Hays Code.
Yeah.
So that's pretty much where the sort of all Disney villains are gay comes from. It's just because at a certain point, you could only portray certain characteristics in a certain light.
And because of that, and they're paying homage and also just kind of following suit on what they know,
right?
Storytelling that isn't really necessarily negating it to like, oh, we're doing this because of this.
Right.
We're doing this because it's always been this.
Right.
Yeah.
So Disney is not trying to make a statement about gay people. What they're doing is just adopting certain tropes from classic cinema, and you see this everywhere, right? You see it like in kids' cartoons from the time, like Looney Tunes, and even the Disney cartoons of the time, where it's like, oh, like why is that character like very like weirdly sexualized? And it's like, it's because it's a trope from classic cinema. Why is that character almost like a shorthand for like a gay person? Because it's from classic cinema. You're not reinventing the wheel. You're just taking, especially if at a certain point you've already developed that visual storytelling shorthand over the course of a few decades.
Right.
You're storytelling to kids. So you're trying to make it as simple and simplified as possible so that way kids can understand it. But those kids at the time, and even the adults at the time, they weren't questioning it because they just were like, well, obviously, this is just what has to happen. Men marry women, and they get married, and they have their 2.5 children, and that's it.
Johnny, go ahead.
Right.
That was just weird.
But yeah, but low key, it gets to be kind of problematic, as you're saying, especially with kids, because like on the podcast and on this channel, we talk about how representation is important because kids pick up on things. When you see kids see people like them on the screen, it empowers them. That's the reason we talk about like why representation is so important. When kids see themselves in things like Black Panther or Crazy Rich Asians, they're like, oh, cool, that's me. It empowers me. I can do cool things like that too. But then when you portray like these villains, you show them as like to putting on these gay characteristics. The problem that is, as you're saying, is that now kids are starting to associate those characteristics with negative things and negative feelings. Which is, as they grow up, they're going to look at like that people from that community in a negative light, which can describe to like when you see like kids when they're growing up. Again, back during the 90s, and even now still happens, and we're trying to like get it out of schools, but using the term gay in a negative way. It feels like that's where a lot of that is reinforced at, because you look at films, it's like, well, again, Hades, for example. Hades from Hercules, one could argue that he has a lot of queer characteristics. But again, he's also portrayed as a villain. So as you're saying, Tony, kids see that, they're like, oh, I don't want to be like Hades, so I'm going to opt the exact opposite of that or whatnot. And then, damn, I feel bad for LGBTQI youth because that can make them feel bad as well. They're always being portrayed as the villain. Every time they see like these films from like Captain Hook or Hercules or Scar, like all these people taking on these like negative characteristics, they feel bad about themselves because like, why are things that I like or are part of me always been shown this negative light? Damn.
Right, but then you do. Oh, I'm sorry. I just wanted to say.
No. Go ahead.
Off of Johnny's idea.
Go ahead.
There has been, though, the reason why we're getting a lot of like Disney villains are gay discourse is because a lot of queer people and a lot of queer youth especially are identifying with those characters and actually hanging on to them as not only representation but just sort of like let's face it, the most interesting characters in the Disney canon, they tend to be the villains, right?
Right.
They're fashionable, they're dynamic, they got great songs, and they're just like flamboyant and out there and unabashed in who they are and what they want, which is usually evil. Maybe some world domination and or murder. I mean,
Or you like to, take puppies and turn them into a coat.
It's all been there.
Yeah, we talked about this. Ursula was a shit. Ursula was amazing. Ursula wasn't technically evil. She was offering opportunities. What you chose to do with those opportunities was up to you.
It's what I live for, to help unfortunate merfolk like yourself. Poor souls with no one else to turn to.
That's all she was offering. Ursula was not a villain. Ursula was amazing, and her hair was fire. Continue, Toni. Continue.
Her hair is fire. That like now there are people who are taking, sort of basically reclaiming that back, taking what was meant to be a negative and now taking it as like, no, there was something about that character that I identify with. I like it, and I don't care if they're the villain, the so-called villain. And now, especially in a time when we are deconstructing the idea of what makes a hero and what makes a villain, like those conversations become far more robust and nuanced rather than just an idea of like good versus evil. Like,
no, I think right now, like right now, are you caught up with Loki? Just real quick.
No, I'm not.
Okay, I won't say anything then. You might have heard some stuff then, but before I do that, and what I kind of want to dive into then instead is like, and I know you have a whole episode on queer baiting in your show, but I kind of want to touch a little bit on that because I do feel like a company like Disney will do projects and things like, not saying that they will do it. Here's what I'm saying. It's like they will do a thing and promote something and say, look what we did. And they pat themselves on the back and go, see, look. And I've seen that happen multiple times with Disney. It seems like someone pointed out on Twitter, I think it's like every 4 months they were like, look, our first queer character. And it's like, didn't you have one in this other thing? Like before? Yeah, but But like, look, isn't that great? Yeah, but are any of them the leads of the projects? They've been experimenting with, which I'm glad they're doing, like same-sex parents, in their children's shows. DuckTales has done it. My High School Musical, the series has done it. The Mighty Duck series that just finished also did it. I'm glad, and there's multiple other cartoon shows, etc. So I'm glad that they're doing it. But also, it is that question of like, great, and you are normalizing that with families who have that. That's fantastic. How many of those are lead characters, and then how many of those are stories that they feel like they're leading the audience into thinking that? Like, what can you elaborate on that, and especially in terms of how Disney approaches it?
So we actually have also another episode about basically the corporatization of pride. And we do actually get into Disney. Disney has a very complicated history with not just queer characters, but also the queer community.
Right.
It wasn't that long ago, in fact, the 80s, where actually if you were part of a queer couple, you couldn't dance with your boyfriend and or girlfriend and or partner if you were in a queer relationship, because Disney did not allow what they termed as homosexual fast dancing. Yeah.
Okay.
So they actually went to court a couple of times until they finally went ahead and like did away with those anti-homosexual and anti-queer policies.
Wait, Toni, wait, just to backtrack, like, so again, they're not dancing together. Was this at their parks? Was this in their films? Like, where was this?
This is like back when Disneyland had Videopolis, that 80s teen
like
dance
dance
area.
Club thing. Yeah,
it was an outdoor dance club, and two gay men went and they were just dancing together, and they got thrown out of the park.
Wait, time out. They went to the park. They're just dancing, and they were thrown out the park for dancing together.
Because they were two men. Yep.
That's bullshit, shit, that's bullshit, shit, that's bullshit, shit, that's bullshit, shit. I hear you talking that bullshit.
So they went to court. The court decided like you're infringing on their First Amendment rights because dance is a protected form of free speech. So then Disney was like, okay, those two gay guys can come in and dance in our park, but nobody else. No
That's
other
some
gays.
bullshit.
Oh yeah.
So then a few
Seriously?
years later, another group of gay men wanted to go dance, were thrown out, took them back to court. Disney, like the same ruling came down, said like you can't do that. That's
What the hell?
on the First Amendment rights. So then became this trend of Disney doing sort of a passive acceptance. This is also around the time when that unofficial gay days was starting up at Disney parks, which was meant for queer families to actually show up in numbers, so that way they wouldn't feel like they were as likely to be discriminated against by park employees or even by other guests at the park. So they all figured, let's all show up, we'll wear red, so that way we all know, hey, we'll feel good about it, we can all like go with our families just to have a good time. Now gay days has become like, you know, I know back in Orlando it's a week-long gay festivities, you know, events and parties and all sorts of stuff. So that kind of became this era of passive acceptance. Slowly over the years, Disney has kind of taken a more progressive stance about inclusivity, which is great and awesome, but it's also like, oh, we remember when you guys weren't in our community.
Right. No,
so
for
like,
sure.
Yeah, so I mean, like I was there when, you know, the Boy Scouts of America, they were on their whole anti-trans policy, and Disney removed them as an official volunteer partner. They just said like, we're cutting ties with that organization. We don't do that because they figured out a long time ago that inclusivity is not just also like good, like morally and ethically, but it's also good business. When you're telling people that you don't want their money, that's not really great for your business. So along the ways, Disney has adopted this more inclusive, you know, stance. Where we can have a debate is about whether or not that's just in the name of good business, or if this is actually a good step forward for the community in terms of representation and visibility. Like, are they just trying to capitalize off of, you know, a specific community? Because I mean, I think I don't have the numbers in front of me, but it was something crazy where like there's a huge, like billions of dollars that the queer community has in buying power. Like I think like 10 million Americans identify as queer in some form. And then not to mention the allies and family members of those queer individuals. So you're talking about huge swath of people who would be like, yeah, it'd be nice if we were welcomed here, and not only welcomed, but with open arms and with everything else that all the other communities have been afforded up to this point. So yeah, it is a weird thing where it's like you're talking about a corporation and how they're interacting with a community in real time, in real life, and also how they're interacting with them by way of their fiction and their entertainment and what they actually decide to put out into the world. So yeah, it's a very weird, complicated thing. I don't think I would ever, I would understand anybody's stance in regards to Disney. If they're just like, it's not enough, we need more.
Sure.
When are we going to get FinPo actually a real canonical thing?
Yeah,
like,
no, 100%.
Or if they're just like, no, it's great because it's a mainstream company that is making these baby steps forward. And if a company as mainstream and ubiquitous as Disney can make these steps, then that's a good thing for everyone. Like, yeah, I get that point too. I don't think there's a wrong way to feel about this.
I mean, let me ask you a question. Is there a way to essentially kind of have both, except like be glad but be cautious? Is there a way to? Yeah,
100%. You should demand more of. I mean, we live in a time where we're very aware of our buying power and our power as individuals, especially within a market, right? And let's face it, Disney, even though they are massive and huge, they're not the only game in town. You know, it's like there are other people making entertainment. There are other people, you know, who are in the exact same businesses that they're in. Whether or not they've adopted more inclusive, you know, policies or not, I can't really speak to that at that moment. But I think Disney does recognize, at least from a business standpoint, that it doesn't make sense to start excluding people. I think where people feel a little icky about it is when they're just like, I'm not getting enough, and I'm certainly not getting enough quick enough. Because like you were
Right.
saying, it's like we're getting like, representation in the background, in the periphery. But where's our queer princess? Where's our gay prince? Where's our, just a show on Disney about, a queer individual or a trans individual or that, and of course, Disney is always going to be framed in the sense of like, well, we want to be welcoming of everybody because we are welcoming to all. But at the same time, we're family friend. That's always the argument, right?
Family friendly. Yeah.
Right. So.
But the BS part about saying family friendly though is like you're saying you're anti-gay, you're also anti-black, and well, you're also anti-women because all those family friendly ideals prescribe to old notions that we shouldn't live by anymore that we know are like bad in practice. So like it's fucked up.
Right. So it becomes this thing of like they are no longer going to adopt those obviously like exclusive attitudes like openly and brazenly anymore. Like they can't. They won't.
Right.
They never will. They're past that point.
Yeah.
Where you get is just sort of like baby stepping back into like the family friendly closet, so to speak, where you're just like, we're not going to put that front and center because we want to make sure we're not offending anybody, including people who still have very discriminatory attitudes towards certain communities.
So as we get ready to wrap up really quickly, again, thank you, Toni, for coming to light us with this and like share your knowledge with us. So as like allies and people moving forward, like what are some recommendations that you would give for people to do? Like if they want to like help out and help push companies like Disney and whatnot to be more inclusive, just tell more queer stories or whatnot. Like what is something that you would like encourage people to possibly do?
I mean, we're such an online community, and it always feels so like lame to just be like, be a keyboard justice warrior. Like, no, but like voicing your opinion really does help. It really does. People pay attention to that. So if you ever know for a fact that there is going to be, a property that is coming out that is promising, a certain, promise about representation, whether they come through with that or not, or they don't, voice your opinion about it. Voice like, we want more. We want this to happen. This deserves to happen. This should be happening already. The fact that it's not is kind of silly that it's not, because it's 2021. I mean, we're already, we're a fifth way through the century. Like, that's crazy. So yeah, I mean, voicing your opinion is always going to be good. Just being good allies to the people in your lives is always going to be the best thing that anybody can do on a very micro level. Interact with the people that you know and that you love. Support the community in every which way that you can, whether it's, respecting pronouns, introducing, yourself and inserting your own pronouns, even as a cis hetero person, if you're just, a firmly non-queer ally. Paying attention when individuals far smarter than myself and far more involved with the movement have something to say. Like, just pay attention, insert yourself when and where you can. I don't think there's ever going to be a point when we march on, the Disneyland. I don't think that's going to be happening anytime soon. But I think there's always ways in which we can support, especially in regards to representation in media, since we are such an online community. To voice your opinion, and it doesn't always have to. I think people always assume that it's only the community that cares. It's only the queer community. It's only the LGBTQ plus community that cares about this sort of stuff.
Yeah.
When you actually go ahead and make it known that, like, I am not part of that community, I'm just an ally, and I care very much deeply about the same things that my community, the other community does, and it's something that I also want, and if it's not happening, that's going to affect my relationship with you guys as a consumer. Like, I feel like that's at the very least what anybody could do.
Before we go, Toni, I want to ask you, give me a really quick answer for this one. Your favorite Disney character that you think does a good job representing the queer community, or and then the character that needs improvement.
I mean, we're about to also do another episode where we talk about High School Musical, the series. Wow.
That's right.
Ryan in the original High School Musical, that was just the most blatant form of queer coding I've ever seen, where that character was, I think, very obviously supposed to be representative of a gay teenage boy. And even the director came out and said, like, that's supposed to be a gay boy. And I didn't feel like Disney was ready for that yet. Like, Kenny Ortega has gone ahead and said, like, that was my call. We didn't do that. Now in High School Musical, the series, it's like, not only are there already characters that are out, accepted, and they're having these very sweet, like, age appropriate interactions with each other, and it's very awesome and sweet. And it just honestly, like, it's so silly to think that puppy love would like affect me that much, but I honestly felt very moved by the fact that, like, oh, this is so surface, but there's something really nice about the fact that it's just a nice sweet tale about, you know, for the two boys in the show that are a couple. And I was like, oh, that's really nice and sweet. Aww.
No, I'm not gonna. I almost teared up during the Case Scenario episode, which we'll be talking about.
Oh my God! Yes, can we talk about it?
Doing the piano with this, I was like, "Oh gosh, Jesus, damn it, you're doing it! Well done." So sad.
There's always gonna be another mountain. I'm always gonna wanna make it move.
So that was, I think, probably the most blatant, like, side-by-side comparison I could make. What happened in High School Musical versus what's happening in that actual High School Musical television series.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Well, again, thank you, Toni, for coming on. You know you're a welcome guest here. And as Toni said, please be an ally, make your voice heard, speak out, create change. And if you want to show Toni your thanks, one, go check out her awesome podcast. Have you tried not being a podcast? Links are below. Send her a thank you letter on Twitter. And also, y'all don't know this, but Toni loves hats. She especially loves berets. So send her a beret. Send her a beret to show your thanks. There they are.
That's not enough. I don't know if you guys know that. Not enough. You got to get that wall has to be covered.
Exactly. She needs a room for her berets. And
you have to have a border of berets.
Not a closet. Exactly. I have a room for my berets.
And with that said, everybody, thank y'all so much for coming. And again, I'm Johnny.
I'm Justin.
I'm not them. Hi.
And that was Toni. And we'll see y'all next time. Peace, y'all.